Every summer when I was a child, we would travel to Mexico. We hail from the Mexican state of Guadalajara. There was a piece of land that belonged to my grandparents. Although they died a few years ago, they still technically own it. My aunt and uncle still reside there as a result. On that piece of land, there are around 5 houses, their main house and the other 4. In actuality, my family's property is situated atop a graveyard. As a result, there are always a variety of accounts of what individuals have saw and experienced. The house closest to the location of the cemetery, was owned by my dad. The sound of hammering on the walls was constant. When my mother, who doesn't believe in the paranormal, stayed there once, she was awakened in the middle of the night by loud hammering on the walls. Additionally, it wasn't just on one. It was banging throughout the entire home. She says, I didn't get good sleep last night because there was banging on the walls. At breakfast when everyone is there, maybe something happened with the neighbor and she was using the hammer. No, that's actually very common in that house, they say. My other uncle, who lives a house over, has actually heard those bangings as well. He therefore out in the middle of the night to find out who was, stirring some trouble outside. He truly believed it to be a person, so he brought a weapon of some kind with him just to be sure he had something to defend himself. And he claimed that despite searching the entire house, no one was there. While in Mexico, my grandmother went to a flea market and purchased a dresser for my uncle that had a mirror attached to it. After a while, she brought it to my uncle's house, where they had it set up. My uncle was sleeping one night when he was awakened by something. He had the unsettling impression that someone was simply staring at him. When he awoke, he was looking around the room. It is dark. Nothing is genuinely visible to him. He hasn't woken up yet. He also notices a young youngster, perhaps 8 or 10 years old, in the room's corner. He attempts to scream out to him to gain his attention, but he's just staring at him. The boy is not moving. He's just staring at my uncle without doing anything else. In order to gain a response from the young child and ask him, "What are you doing in my room?" my uncle chooses to grab his cover or a pillow and toss it at him. The young boy leaps from his current location to the dresser and vanishes into the mirror. In the future, perhaps the next summer, my adult cousin and her son, who was around that age at the time, traveled to Mexico for a summer vacation. As everyone knows, we all take vacations and return home. My uncle gives her his room, so she and her child can sleep there. Around the same time in the middle of the night, her young son begins to shake her. "Mom, wake up, mommy. There is a young boy. Go to sleep, Mijo. Put yourself to sleep. You're having a dream. Nothing is there. Mommy. There's a little boy and he's smiling at me and his teeth are ugly. There's nothing there, Mijo. Return to your sleep at last." He gives up and returns to his slumber. The following morning, during breakfast, my cousin bemoaned how exhausted she was from her tiny boy keeping her up at night. They are also sharing this narrative with my grandmother and my uncle, whose house, belongs to them. My grandma and uncle, who are aware of what happened to him, simply stare at one another. She continues by telling them, he kept trying to wake me up, adding that a young child was present in the room and that he was grinning at him. "Well, that kind of happened to me too," says my uncle. He then shares his story with her. The next night, my cousin and her son, of course, did not sleep there. One of my aunts here in the United States ends up with that exact dresser and mirror. Extremely superstitious is my aunt. Like a witch doctor, she had gone to see. The dresser and mirror are currently stored in the garage. She is aware of this mirror's history. Although she is aware of the story, I'm not sure why she owns this mirror. In any case, she visits a witch doctor for irrelevant reasons. Additionally, this witch doctor presents her with a small trinket that resembles a pillow, one red and one green, like luck was the target of one, while money was the target of the other. Additionally, she always had these tiny pillows in her purse. She discovered that pillows were gone one day while searching through her purse. My aunt confronted her teenage sons about it at the time, saying things like, "Hey, you guys were going through my purse. My little pillows are gone. You men were searching through my purse. But why?" They all keep saying no. "No, Mom, it wasn't us," they say. "Nothing like that was done by us." They discover those pillows in the garage by the mirror, but they have no idea how they got there. They say, "Okay, no. We need to get rid of this mirror after that particular incident with her. There's a problem with this mirror. It was purchased at a flea market. Mexico is a location. In order for this young boy to become trapped in this mirror, something or someone must have done something to it. In the end, it's what made them decide to remove the mirror. Everything came to a halt. In essence, nothing more happened with a little boy or anything going missing after they shattered it. The fact that that land was constructed over a graveyard has always made us nervous. Even if there have been other, minor incidents, I find that to be the most unsettling. This occurred in May 2015. For the first time, my spouse and I were traveling to New Orleans. We were given a 2-story room because we owned a timeshare. We planned to spend a full 2 weeks there. They wouldn't allow us share a room for both weeks, for some reason. After a week in one room, we were required to be checked out and placed in a different room for the second week. If it makes sense, this occurred on the final Friday of our first week there. You're gazing at the room when you first check in, and it's really cool. It was exactly what you would expect to see in New Orleans. The walls were made of brick, and I recall even entering and seeing strange paintings. I was walking around everything while taking photos and playing a movie. I recall thinking, I don't know about this, as I walked upstairs. We were visiting New Orleans for the first time, so I dismissed it. I was ecstatic. It also contained a second room. I simply didn't enjoy it. It's not like I want to be in here alone. I was aware that I was dreaming in the first room on the final night we were there, because we were in the master bedroom, as I recall. This was like a 2-story room, as I mentioned. I recall hearing noises while I was sitting up in bed. It seemed to me that doors were opening and closing, cabinets were opening and closing, and so on. They were aware that our room was empty. My spouse and I were alone. My spouse was in the bathroom, and I knew it. My husband was in the bathroom, and I'm not sure how I knew that. "Hey! Are you not hearing this?" I said as I sat in bed. Something tugged at my leg when I said that. I went crazy. I felt as though someone had suddenly seized both of my ankles and dragged me to the ground. I lay flat on my back on my bed when they pulled my ankles down. I was immobile when I woke up. I was unable to move at all. My eyelids were the only thing I could move. What's going on, I thought. We were both sleeping in the same room as me. When I woke up, the first dream occurred in the room, and was immobile. I was aware that I was in the room, and that my husband was lying at arm's length next to me. Suddenly, I recall 2 distinct creatures or objects. I had no idea what they were. However, I sensed a hand on one shoulder and another on the other. I was being restrained by them. Although I could feel them holding me down, it wasn't difficult. They looked like that is all I can recall. I only noticed 2 eye sockets and a lengthy face in the Monet painting of the screaming figure, and they were covered in mist. My eyelids were the only thing I could move. He was in bed next to me, and all I wanted for the life of me was for him to wake me awake. Both of those things suddenly appear in my voice, in my own voice. I thought they were ridiculing me. They seemed to be making fun of me, saying things like, you can't talk, you can't talk. I could sense that I wanted to cry. I simply shut my eyes. Jesus was the object of my prayer. I prayed to the Holy Spirit and God. I prayed for everyone. I even shouted out to my dad, saying something like, "Dad, if you can hear me, please," because he had passed away 3 years earlier. Even my paternal grandfather, who passed away in 2012, had heard me call out. My thoughts were, "Please help me. Please." I woke up in about 10 seconds after calling out to my grandfather. I managed to awaken. My husband was awakened right away, and I said, "I just had a bad dream." He merely consoled me because I didn't want to tell him everything, and I knew he was sound asleep. However, I spent the next 20 minutes praying and simply giving thanks to God for allowing me to awaken from that dream. The scariest thing I've ever encountered was that my mother freaked out when I finally told her, at least a year later. Then she said, "What? God? Oh God, I'm shocked that you experienced that." But she did believe me. "I'm sorry that happened to you," she said. The Quarter House was the name of the resort where we were staying, as I recall. Was it constructed in 1830? I felt it was awesome that we were staying in a place that was so old, even though I knew it was old. Although I enjoy learning about the past, I did not anticipate that this would occur, simply because it was so antique. I found it cool. I wouldn't have stayed if I had known it was haunted, because I'm a real frightened cat. I still get dreams inside dreams, but they don't wake me up like I'm paralyzed by sleep. However, I have dreamed within dreams. I experienced this maybe 19 or 20 years ago. My age is 38. My family is Hispanic, and since we have so many cousins, we usually become friends with them. I used to spend a lot of time with a girl cousin. She asked me to come over one day. Her mother had relocated. I hadn't visited that place. To go to this place, I rode a bus across town. My cousin and her older sister were there when I arrived. They say, "Hey, I'm glad you're here." Right away, we were on the verge of heading to the shop. "Would you like to accompany us?" I had had enough of the heat in California. "No, I'll stay here," I replied. And she responds, "Excellent. Watch out for my daughter. She's sleeping. We will return after visiting the nearby convenience store." I sit there and watch TV while they go. The door shut as soon as they were gone. The young child sits up and begins to repeatedly ask me, "Where is my mother? Where is my mother?" I would always respond to her. It seems like she would keep asking if she hadn't heard me talking to her. After some while, I decided to sit here and watch TV as the female continued to ask me the same things. It might have been 15 or 20 minutes. The metal door is heard. It opens. It makes that sound that you hear on these doors. Then I can hear the wooden door swing open. Then I hear my cousin. She's laughing as if they're joking. She says, "Ha, Joanna." I hear what sounds like a plastic bag landing on a wooden table. The exact sound you hear of a cheap corner store bag. I look at the little girl and I respond to her, "Your mom's home." I walk into the kitchen. There's absolutely nobody there. The doors are closed. Everything's closed. There's nothing there. I walk right back to the room thinking, what did I hear? What's going on? The little girl's still sitting there, but now she's staring at me. She starts asking me all over again where her mommy's at. She's probably asked me 15, 20 times where her mom's at in the same tone over and over again. I hear the wooden door scratching across the floor a few minutes later. Once again, I hear my cousin laughing, and she says, "Ha ha, effing Joanna." I hear the Coke bag hitting the table. I'm too afraid to move. I spend a minute sitting there. I will not speak to the girl. She continues to ask me for her mom. Suddenly, my cousin appears from around the corner. I leap to my feet, dash to the kitchen, and say to her, "I heard that you guys came, but you weren't here." My cousin's older sister and I are both just looking at me. It's not a huge problem, you know. They say, "We want you to tell my mother what happened to you when she gets home after I tell them what happened to me." After an hour or two, my aunt arrives home and is unsurprised. She begins by informing me that my aunt was a single mother when she initially moved into the home. She would frequently catch her daughter in her closet, digging through the boxes and creating a mess when they first moved into that place. "What are you doing in there?" asks my aunt, who is sick of begging her to leave the closet. "Why do you continue to enter my closet? And what do you want to find?" The little girl is telling me that there are toys in here, her daughter said after giving her a quick glance. "I'm in here for that reason." She claims to have talked to the proprietor. "Weird things have been happening in this house." She asked him, "Have you ever heard anything from anyone?" "I've had a hard time keeping this place rented," said the owner. "I've heard a few things. I'm not a big believer. I haven't personally encountered anything. He didn't actually remain there. There was a deceased family in the house," he claimed. "A daughter was born to a mother and a father. That was the house where they had died. For a lot of years, my aunt resided there, but she had a relationship with a man there. They would go out together, and occasionally he would go out alone while she stayed at home. He had gone out with his friends one evening. She remained at home. She was employed. She was worn out. Late at night, she dozed off on the couch in the living room. The sounds of someone arriving roused her. After spending a night out with his buddies, she observed the person she believed to be her lover returning home. "I just glanced and told him you're going to sit with me," she said, allowing him to take a seat at the end of the couch. Later, she observed this figure sit down. Someone knocked on the door at 3 a.m. She opens the door and gets up. Her guy is being dropped off by his pals and is just arriving home. In that house, things happen to other people I know. My sibling has a tale to tell. She accompanied a friend from high school to that house after she graduated. That aunt had accompanied my mother to the casino. Sitting in the living room, this girl felt weird. She continued to look at the tiny restroom on her left. It appeared as though the door was attempting to open. The light was on, then it was open, but she could hear nothing. The door was still open when she looked back, but a doll was now perched on the sink. Exit the restroom with that face. Many members of our family were aware of the events occurring at that residence. Before doing this interview, I spoke with another relative, and he even said, "Yeah, everybody that's been there knows that there's something weird going on at this house." Not everyone had the same experience there. Everyone there reports feeling as though they are being watched. Something seems to be waiting for you. It's only waiting to harm you. I feel uncomfortable in there because of what happened to me. I recall attempting to look it up years ago. The internet, when I was 19, almost 20 years ago. In reality, I never discovered anything. When I checked up the house, I discovered that it's not a very nice one, which is why it gets rented out so frequently. It's incredibly small. It almost appears to be an additional room in the studio. People don't stay that long, in my opinion. One such person was my aunt. She was older. She thinks everything is true, including God. "Well, I'll just pray," she says. "I'll be left alone." After some while, She didn't want to remain there. Something seemed to be attempting to hold her down and stand on top of her. She stood up, gathered her breath, and did other things because she needed a struggle. That was similar to what I had heard from that residence. I recall witnessing the renovation of our neighbor's ancient home. Stories about this house being haunted would never stop. They would lease it. Personally, I never noticed anything. The neighbor's constant claims that this small house was haunted led me to assume that perhaps humans do sense things, if at all. It shared our home's property light. I was probably in the 6th grade on the day they were rebuilding it, and I was being inquisitive. I'm out there. I noticed that one of the construction guys is suddenly saying, "Hey, everyone stop. We need to sort something out. So go call the owner. He's also telling me to go." "No, I'm on my property," I say. "I didn't order you to go," because I had visited that house. The cement floor beneath it needed to be redone because it had broken. I was right there when they raised the cement. A human skeleton was discovered after they raised the cement. It was still wearing jeans and a flannel shirt. I can still clearly recall. I watched as construction workers picked up the bones, disposed of them in the trash, and went back to work. The girls who lived there would hear noises and see things upstairs. That's what I saw at that house. However, I'm not sure if it has anything to do with it. You don't consider these things when you're a child. However, because it was such a significant event, I can recall it as an adult. "Oh my God, they found a dead person," I exclaimed, however. Looking back at what they were doing at that house, I can tell you that they didn't dig when they discovered him beneath the foundation and cement. He stood between the dirt and the poured cement. It was nothing like an old graveyard. It would be like that if you picked up a broken piece of cement on the street. I recall seeing hair. IT was aged and like bronze, bunched up in a reddish-brondish hue that I noticed at dusk. It resembled the skeleton with its remaining hair. IT was wearing a flannel shirt. The jeans are obviously worn out and the colors have faded. But I'm not sure. I recall seeing the jeans. Things like that should fall apart, right? Although they had holes in it, it was largely undamaged. He reached for the leg, as I recall. It was wearing jeans, but you could see the bones splitting when he pulled them in the waist area. They had to pick up each bone separately and dispose of it because the long leg bone was still in the jeans. I recall researching it, but as an adult, I had no idea when that house was constructed, where to look, or even what to think. However, I did wonder how many other people were living under cement slabs somewhere. On a corner property was this house. This property belonged to my aunt. You had more acreage in these older Fresno neighborhoods. My aunt, or whoever had owned the property before her, had constructed a 2-story, 2-bedroom apartment directly behind her house to the right. It had a little square-like shape. That was built there. The house directly behind her was being rented by one of my other aunts. It appears that the house's foundation was no longer stable, which is why they had raised the floor. The walls had cracks in them. I suppose the home was moving. The house's base floor needed its cement to be repoured. After tearing up and discarding the old material, pour fresh cement. That crack was located in their living room, where they would sit and watch TV all day. The body was underneath the foundation crack, which is where the dead body was.